today in the media conference with Lal Goel, which is brought to you by V4 News, Caru News, today in the media conference with Lal Goel, which is brought to you by V4 News, Caru News, V4 Stream, Malnadu TV India, News Gaon Se, Samvad Sarocar News, Bharat Post News, Gyan and Organ Donation India Foundation. Our endeavor is to enlighten you with the current topic. And today is a Friday, and today's our topic is on, as you know, that we keep on every Friday, it's a youth conclave. So today's topic is Youth Conclave on Research Methods in Business. Staying on top of industry, research is an integral part of a successful business. Whether a company is looking for a new base of operations or a would-be entrepreneur wants to launch a first business using the right business, research methods can be the difference between success or failure. And using the right research methods can still result in failure if the data is not correct and current. Business research is a field of practical study in which a company obtains data and analyzes the same to manage the company better. Executives and managers who use business research methods can better understand their company, the position it holds in the market, and how to improve that position. And to understand the research methods in business, today we have two chief guests with us, and we also have, one moment, we have to admit, and we also have youth guests with us. So I would like to invite my first chief guest of the program, and he is Professor Dr. Sudhi Saran. Professor Dr. Sudhi Saran is the former visiting professor IIM Lucknow and University of Texas at Dallas, USA. He is the senior director of Don Bosco Group, Bengaluru. He is the founder of Dr. Saran Consultancy, California, USA. He is the director of Eldo Private Limited, New Delhi. He has done his MBA from IIM Ahmedabad in 1980. He did PhD in 1986. He started teaching and researching business and entrepreneurship since 1984. He published research papers in reputed journals, international seminar proceedings, and chapters in books of readings. He started academic administration phase as dean in 1997, rising to executive director, controlling management and engineering institutes in 2007. Her Highness Governor of Karnataka nominated Dr. Saran to the Senate of Bangalore University in recognition of his distinguished academic contributions. He was visiting professor to University of Texas at Dallas from 2012 to 2019. He also visited Washington State University and President University Indonesia on the invitation of the Dean Faculty of Business in 2018. He innovated and implemented a unique model to double the turnover with existing infrastructure in one accounting year. He is co-promoter of Institute of Family Business Management Society. He is honorary director of NCR Delhi-based high-tech B2B digital startup. He is also co-founder of OWGI Foundation, which promotes social entrepreneurship ventures. Welcome, Professor Dr. Sudhi Saran on our show. Professor Dr. Sudhi Saran, today, as you know, the topic is research methods in business. And we have many youths, pan-India, I have joined today, although some where the exams are on, but still many of the youths have joined. So we would like to start the program. We do not want to waste the time because we want the more and more questions which will be answered by you and the other chief guests. So Youth Conclave on Research Methods in Business, Professor Dr. Sudhi Saran, please.
Thank you, Mr. Goel, for this opportunity. I'm honored to be here with you. Thank you, Professor Lakshmi, for joining and agree to share the platform with us. I'm very certain together we will be able to give the richest answer to the young talent which is joining with us today. When we talk about business research or research methods in business, the very first question that comes up to mind is, what for? The answer lies in the usefulness, the value, the contribution which research makes to business. Business is defined as taking inputs, processing them, and converting output. Obviously, the value addition happens in the processing part. Does the research method contribute to that? That is the moot question. I believe in order to complete the value addition, and I hope Professor Lakshmi agrees with me, we need to make decisions. And in order to make decisions, we have to recognize that they are made in a context and they require information as essential input. The function and the value of research methods in business lies exactly in this aspect, that they contribute to quality information. I would like to share with you, Mr. Goel and Professor Lakshmi, when I got the flyer from Mr. Goel day before yesterday, I shared with more than 100 people and requested them to give me words of encouragement and give me valuable suggestions. One such person was Mr. 𝐂𝐑𝐔. He was my batchmate at Ahmedabad. He went to, Bonds, and then he moved to US and joined Molson Coors. He rose to the number 2 position, being CEO of all the businesses of this company except the US, Canada, and UK. So 𝐂𝐑𝐔 says, you see, I appreciate the word quality you add to information, because today in the information era, we have deluge of information, but we are still seeking quality information that will drive our decision making. And this also gives you the confidence, not only me, the academic, is saying that business information is very important today, as always, but the practitioners also agree with me. So, Professor Lakshmi, we are sitting and sharing the platform on a very vital platform. 2 points I want to make before, the framing of the theme is complete, according to me. The research people speak a very different language than the business people. They may be speaking English, but the English, so to say, spoken by Mr. Goel is different by the English spoken by me, Dr. Saran, as the researcher, or Dr. Lakshmi as the researcher. In order for my young people to appreciate this and other viewers to appreciate this, let me mention quickly, if I take decision problems, what language do I speak as a businessman? I say how to reduce turnover rates in BPO sector. How to reduce the turnover in BPO sector. What language does the research fraternity speak? They speak the language that what is the impact of shift duties on worker exhaustion and turnover intentions of the BPO employees. This fairly illustrates, I can give you more examples to say this point, that the business people speak a different language and the research community speaks a different language. It is like one is speaking French, the other is speaking German, or one is speaking Tamil, another is speaking Telugu. So, to illustrate the point, let me mention one more example. The business community says, my decision problem is, can the housing and real estate growth be accelerated? Can the housing and real estate growth be accelerated? What does the research community say? What is their translation? What is the current investment in real estate and housing? Can the demand in the sector be forecasted and expedited in the next 6 months? So this is it. And when we go to make my information highest of the high quality, then there is another thing which Professor Lakshmi will appreciate, and people exposed to research methods will appreciate. Business people may not. This is the work tool which we have. But without me stating this one, if the topic is not completed. So, Mr. Goel, please allow us to talk some technical language of research here. When you tell me the decision problem of yours as a business person, I go back to my drawing board and build something from there, and that is I translate it into research questions. Your business question, I translate into research question. Suppose you are a businessman who is facing the public disgust, so to say, with plastic bags as a packaging source. I go to buy my vegetables, the retailer, the vendor, weighs the quantity of tomatoes I want, potatoes I want, and then he pulls out a plastic bag, puts it there, and this is where the society as such is now saying, oh, this is not the thing desirable. If this is the context in which we are doing, what is my research question? What is the nature of plastic bag uses? And then what do? I convert that into research objectives. And 4 research objectives flow from that one. The first research objective is to identify the different uses of plastic bags. Second one is to find out the method of disposal of used bags. The third objective comes out is to find out who uses plastic bags. Finally, to find out what is the level of consciousness that people have about the environment. This one I'll take further, and Dr. Lakshmi will appreciate very much. I break it down to variables to be studied. Usage is the one variable with respect to behavior. So usage behavior is my complete variable. The other variable is set, actually, demographic details of the user. Once I go to this third essay, variables to be studied, I go and identify what exactly is the primary information that is required. And I name for this question 2 of them, uses of plastic bags, and the second one is disposal of plastic bags. Now the final thing comes, I have to recognize what is my population of restaurants, which is what I'm going to study. And population is not a general English word. As I said, researchers speak. So I'm saying in the language of the researcher, population is a very specific term, very specific entity, very specific meaning. And there are 3 populations that I have to study: consumer, retailers, and the waste disposal agency. So this is one example. And why I'm mentioning is most of the beginners and many of the experienced people don't go through the rigor which is stated here. Your business problem, I translate it to research question, that I further break down into research objectives from which I derive variables to be studied. Then I name the information which I'm seeking and the population where the information will be drawn as rough data. So this is the nitty-gritty of research community. This I mentioned because research problem and the decision problem are not the same thing, though they are connected. And the nitty-gritty together completes the picture of business research methods. I stop here because, our time is very precious, as I said. Thank you, Professor Lakshmi. Thank you, Mr. Goel, for this golden opportunity. I'm sure our participants will benefit tremendously today. Looking forward.
Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Sudhi Saran, for explaining the difference of languages between research and business. I am sure those who understand and those who are our youth who are participating today and those who are watching our show and those who are in business, or even they are not students, if they are doing the business, they will definitely be benefited by your wisdom, words of wisdom. Now, I would like to thank you very much, Professor Saran. I would like to invite my next chief guest, and she is Professor Dr. Lakshmi Goyal. Professor Dr. Lakshmi Goyal is the Associate Dean of University of North Florida, Jacksonville, USA. She is a Professor of Information Systems with an established record in teaching, research, and administration. Professor Lakshmi received her PhD in Decision and Information Sciences from University of Houston. She holds a Master's in Computer Science from the University of Houston. She is a Master's in Computer Applications from the University of Pune, India. Her research is at the intersection of technology, organizations, and human behavior. She has over 50 articles published in top-tier reputed journals and over 60 conferences presentations. She has received the Web of Science High Impact Research Award, an Innovator in Education Award, and was named a mover and shaker of Northeast Florida. Welcome, Professor Dr. Lakshmi Goyal on our show. Professor Dr. Lakshmi Goyal, you have heard what Professor Dr. Sudhi Saran has explained. Now, we would like to know your views on research methods in business. Professor Dr. Lakshmi Goyal, please.
Thank you, Mr. Goel, and thank you, Dr. Sharan, for setting the stage so well. Is my audio coming through okay
Yeah,
now?
please. Yes,
okay.
please.
Okay, great. So, Dr. Sharan, I feel like you covered a lot of ground already, but I just want to step back a little bit and again frame what we're talking about today. So the first point I want to make is business is not the same as commerce, right? Very often we think about business as this exchange, this monetary exchange of goods and services, but business is much broader than that, right? And you can see it in the variety of disciplines. So all of you are going to school for some discipline within the business field, and you could be doing things like finance, economics, marketing, human resource management, information systems, etc. And now we're starting to see even more diverse types of disciplines. So things like hospital administration, construction management, real estate management, all of this is business, right? So we have to think broader than the simple exchange of goods and services, which was, the old school, the traditional way of looking business. There's a lot more involved now in what we consider business disciplines, and it intersects with a lot of different things. The other thing I want to point out is that it's also a science, right? When we use the word science, we tend to think about your natural sciences, your chemistry, biology, physics, etc. Business is also a science. It's just an applied science. So instead of being a natural science, like what we see in nature, it's an applied science. It's stuff we do as human beings to affect the way we interact with our world and with our environment. So as an applied science, we have different methods and different research philosophies as compared to the natural sciences, right? So we all know what the methods are in the natural sciences. That's something that human beings have been studying for centuries. The applied sciences are newer because as a society, these are things that evolve and that we've developed over time. So as an applied science, we look at research in business as an intersection of people, of processes within these organizations that we've created. Right, and
one moment, please. Join late.
Yes, sir.
Yes, please go ahead. Sorry, Professor Lakshmi.
No
Somebody joined late, and okay, please go ahead.
No problem. That's a common thing with Zoom nowadays. So,
yes.
Yeah. So all of this is to say that the way we look at business, we can still apply the same hat as we do for sciences. We just have to look at it from different perspectives and from a different set of tools. And as Dr. Sharan said, a different language, but we can still draw on our understanding of research as we know it from the natural sciences. There's a lot that we can bring into the business disciplines as well. Right. Now moving on to the technical aspect. So I have a very simple way of looking at research. You need a hammer and you need a nail. Your nail is what you want to study, right? What is it that is a question that needs to be answered, whether it is in the field, whether it's in your consumer behavior, whether it is within an organization, whether it's in the stock market. What is it that you're trying to figure out? What is it that you're trying to solve? That's your nail. Your hammer is how are you going to solve it, right? And your hammer is your research method, which also in a way comes from your philosophy of research. And we'll talk about this a little more, but you can have a philosophy that says that everything that we do can be measured in numbers, right? If I want to know how the consumers feel about Teslas, I can go ask them on a scale of 1 to 10. And if they say 8, 8 means they like it, right? So a number represents how they feel about it. But your philosophy can also be that feelings cannot be measured, that it's up to human interpretation, and it's about, a human construct of the way of looking things. And then you get into qualitative research and case studies and interpretivism and stuff like that. So your philosophy will drive your hammer, which is your research method. And once you have the research method that can fit the nail that you want to drive, that's your research process, and you're able to do research that way. So I look at it very simply, right? What is the question I'm trying to answer? That's my nail. What's the best hammer I can use to hammer that nail? And then how can I kind of bring those two together? And Dr. Saran as well as Mr. Goel, they talked about some practical applications of research. Even though I'm housed in academia, I work for a business school at a university. A lot of my research is actually applied. So I work with companies in Jacksonville. So if you're not familiar with Jacksonville, it's a big port city in Florida. We have the 7th largest port in the US. We do a lot of import exports. We also have a huge military base here. We have a huge healthcare system here. So I work with companies in many different industries to help them with research issues. So I have to wear the hat of both an academic as well as a practitioner and do that translation that Dr. Saran said. What does their problem translate into in terms of a research question, and then, solve it. But I will say that translation is becoming easier and easier because companies see the value of research. If you don't do research, then all you're doing is reacting. Right? All a company is doing is reacting. What research allows you to do is to have an informed perspective about the future. So you're able to analyze what has happened in the past and say, okay, this is the decision making that I'm going to do based on everything that's happened in the past to inform me about the future. If you do that without research, then you're relying just on your gut instinct, right? And we have some great CEOs that have made great decisions just based on their instinct or based on their management skills. But human beings are not perfect, right? We make mistakes. So why not let data help us make better decisions? And that's where research really comes into play. And companies are now seeing that more and more. And that's why you see that research plays a bigger role even in the applied field. So, you get a PhD, your only option is not to work at a university. You are now welcomed in a lot of companies because they really value that research skill set. So with that, I'll turn it back to Mr. Goel.
Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Lakshmi Goyal, for giving your valuable views about the research in methods in business. And I'm sure today's our youth conclave will be beneficial for everyone because we are going to have two chief guests, two experts in the field who are going to answer the queries going to be asked by the youth guest. So without wasting time, I would like to invite my first youth guest, and he is Lieutenant Colonel 𝐂𝐀𝐑𝐔 𝐍𝐄𝐖𝐒. Lieutenant Colonel 𝐂𝐀𝐑𝐔, you have heard both the chief guests, Professor Saran as well as Professor Goel. Please introduce yourself and ask the question.
Good morning, everyone. I am Lieutenant Colonel 𝐂𝐀𝐑𝐔 𝐍𝐄𝐖𝐒. I am pursuing MBA HR Management from Sandeep University, which is located in Nashik. My question to the esteemed guest is, how do you gauge the accuracy of research done and that it is free from any biases?
Okay, the question goes to Professor Saran first. Please unmute Professor Saran.
The science of management is built around not only guessing, but measuring bias. It is a very systematic method. Errors are measured. So don't worry, alert. It is a very systematic one. The methods are built around that one. So if there is bias, it will be detected and measured. So, that can be countered. Hope you understand.
Okay, thank you, Professor Saran. Dr. Lakshmi Goyal, would you like to add anything what Professor Saran said?
Yes, so the methods are absolutely, there. In a way, you also have to look at what your methodology is, right? So if you're coming from that quantitative philosophy, you're most likely going to use statistical methods. And statistics has very, like Dr. Saran said, it has very well-established ways of measuring validity as well as reliability and generalizability. So those are the three things you always look for, right? How valid are my results within a certain range of a confidence interval? Because you can never have 100% accuracy or validity. You're always taking a sample of a population, right? So you look at the validity, you look at the reliability. So if I do the same study again, what are my chances of getting the same results, right? That's what reliability. And then generalizability is how can I extrapolate from my sample to the population, right? Is it generalizable? So within statistics, these things, and you can find that in pretty much any classical textbook out there. It's a little more tricky when it comes to qualitative or interpretivist research, because then you're relying, and I do a lot of that when I do work with companies on action research projects or case studies, because then you're relying on the insights of the researcher and how they interpret the data, right? So for example, one of the projects I'm working on, I host a forum of CIOs from across the world, and we talk about cybersecurity issues, right? So that's my data. It's this interview data from multiple CIOs of multinational companies that have multi-billion-dollar portfolios, and all they're doing is talking about cybersecurity. And what my research question is, what is the state of art and state of thinking when it comes to prevention of ransomware attacks? That's my research question, right? But how do I know that my interpretation of what all of these people are saying is accurate and valid, right? So it's a little more tricky when it comes to qualitative data. And there are some ways, and there are some textbooks which outline the ways in which you can establish that, right? And one of that is to bring in other researchers and have inter-rater reliability. So show them your interpretation of that qualitative data and see whether they agree with your insights and establish some sort of metric for inter-rater reliability. So you do have to do it, especially if you want to publish your research. That's the first question that will be asked, right? How valid are the results? How accurate are the results? So based on the methodology you've chosen, you do need to go out and see what are the ways in which you can show that this is not just, your result, and that it can be replicated by other researchers who do a similar study.
Thank you, Professor Goyal. So thank you, Professor Saran and Professor Goyal, and thank you, Lieutenant Colonel Alad. Now my next youth guest is Mr. Anirudh Goyal. Are you there, Mr. Anirudh Goyal? Please keep your videos on, otherwise I have to go to the next guest. Why you are keeping? Yes. You have joined late. Please turn your mobile in a horizontal position. Yes, please introduce yourself and ask your question, please.
Yes, sir. My name is Anirudh Goyal. I want to ask a simple question.
First, you introduce yourself. You are a student of which class, in which college, and which city?
My name is Anirudh Goyal. I am a student of HMCS, Hindustan Institute of Management Computer Studies. I am from Agra, doing MBA from here. I want to ask that what is the importance of research methodologies as a student I am?
Yeah, this question goes to Professor Lakshmi, please.
So as a student, the one thing, you will be asked at any interview is, where do you see yourself in 5 years or in 10 years, right? And if your answer is that you want to be in some kind of a managerial role, administrative role, then research is important. If you're content being at an engineering kind of role or a technical role, maybe you don't need research because you're going to do the same thing in and out every day. But the minute you step into management and you have decision making under your responsibilities, you have to be able to do research because you have to be able to make decisions based on what has happened in the past. You may not call it research, right? But you will have to do some kind of analysis. So having that training in research methodologies will really help you be a good decision maker, a good manager, and a good administrator. People that are good at statistics go a very long way in their companies. Trust me on that, right? It doesn't matter which kind of company or which industry. It could be a marketing firm. It could be, a stock trading firm. It could be a human resource management firm. If you understand how to make better informed decisions based on the data you have available, you are able to get further ahead in your career. So as a student, you have to, and this is the time when you can learn that, right? It's just like, like calculus or integration or things like that. There's a time in your life when you have to learn it. It's in your middle school or high school. Once that time passes, it gets more and more difficult to learn those fundamentals. Undergraduate school and graduate school is the time to learn the language of research methods, right? If you wait until the time you're already in a company, it's going to be much tougher for you to pick up that language. So understand now what a p-value is, understand now what a confidence interval is, understand now what are the tests of validity, reliability. Those things will really help you in the long run in your career.
Okay, thank you, Professor Goel. Professor Dr. Sudhi Saran, would you like to add anything?
You see, she has said everything important. Only one point needs to be added, and that is, she mentioned in her presentation something called research philosophy. And quantitative and qualitative is what we researchers call it. That is, that which can be measured and that is very difficult to measure aspect of it. You see, research will train you for formulating the answer. She used the example of nails and hammers. There are multiple kind of nails which a businessman will perform are available, present themselves, are obstacles. And you have to have not only one hammer, not two hammers, but you have to have as many as you can have so that you can customize the hammer to the nail. Today in the information age 2022, it is very important that you don't have a general hammer for all the nails. That will be your undoing. Her language was, if you're going to do technical things, you don't need much. But if you're stepping into a managerial role, you do need that one. Why it is important is, this is the age of competition, always has been career advancement. So if you have research methodology ingrained into your decision making, which Lakshmi did say in her own way. So I'm re-emphasizing that point. By God, these are the young years. Please master that one. Otherwise, you'll be sitting duck for a smart fellow who comes with research methodology, philosophy for decision making and beats you hollow. So that's how it is important.
Thank you very much, Professor Saran. And thank you, Mr. Lal Goel. Now, my next youth guest is Mr. Anurag Lala. Are you there, Mr. Anurag Lala? No. Okay. So now, why you are keeping your mobile, this thing, I think the data, they will not consume more if you are using the video. Please turn your mobile in a horizontal position. That's why we want you to join at time. Okay. First, you introduce yourself and then you ask the question. Please, Mr. Anurag Lala.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Anurag Lala. I'm pursuing Bachelor's of Business Administration from IMS Ghaziabad University Courses Campus. And my question to you is when we talk about research, and if I go more precisely about the exploratory research part, then why there is not use of any hypothesis there in exploratory research?
Okay. Question goes to Professor Saran, please.
Answer is very simple. Exploratory is when I don't even know what my question is. I am just, completely ignorant. That is when exploratory is used. If it is a dark room, I'm searching. If there is a matchbox, I can light a stick, then find the candle, light that one, and then find out where is the light switch and put on broad light. So you see, this is the metaphor for exploratory. You don't have enough knowledge. What are the variables? What are the relationships, which is the prerequisite for formulating a hypothesis? Thank you very much. I hope it's clear.
Thank you, Professor Saran. Professor Goel.
Yeah, absolutely. Another way to say this is hypotheses are based on theories, right? If you have a theory about how your data might play out, then you formulate hypotheses based on that theory. For exploratory research, you don't have theories, right? So we call it grounded theory research because we're hoping that the data allows you to generate theory from it. So it's a process that allows you to create theory, right? So the other term for exploratory research is grounded theory research, and there are methodologies for that as well, right? So it's not, exploratory research is not just going into a dark room without a flashlight. There are different ways to approach exploratory research, and there are ways of testing. To the point of the question that an earlier gentleman had, there are ways of testing validity, generalizability, reliability, even for exploratory research, right? So even though you might not have hypotheses based on existing theory, there's still methodology that goes along with exploratory research.
Thank you, Professor Goel, and thank you, Mr. Anurag Lala. Now my next youth guest is Miss Asfia Samreen.
Yes, good morning, everybody. I am Asfia Samreen from St. Joseph's Degree and PG College, Hyderabad. I'm pursuing MBA from this college. My question is, how can we make research more researchable?
Okay, question goes to Professor Dr. Lakshmi Goyal.
May I ask the student to clarify the question? What do you mean by researchable? What's your definition of researchable?
Yeah, what I actually meant is how can we include many more aspects into it, exploring much of the resources.
So I still don't get your question, but I will try to answer it and then tell me if I'm addressing your question or not.
Sure, ma'am.
So research, like I said, there's always a three-pronged approach to research. There's validity, reliability, and generalizability. You cannot have research that's high on all the three dimensions. If you have highly generalizable results, your validity will probably be low. The highest validity research are controlled experiments, right? So if you have, and that's why in natural sciences, you see mice in a lab, in a maze, and they do one thing so that you can have one dependent variable and one independent variable and see the correlation and causation between those two variables. Unfortunately, in business, we cannot have labs and mice. You cannot put consumers into a laboratory and test what they're going to do if they're using one soap versus another soap, right? So we have a lot of confounding variables in order for it to be generalizable, in the population. But what we're losing in that aspect is validity, right? Because we don't know what affects the consumer's choice. And I'm just using consumer behavior as one example of a kind of research question, right? So in business research, as researchers, you always have to balance that validity versus generalizability aspect. Do I want my research to be applicable to the entire market, to the entire industry, to all the car shoppers, or do I want my research to be tightly controlled so that I know exactly which variable is being affected by which other variable, right? So my answer to your question is there is no way to have a perfect methodology that balances all of these aspects. You have to trade off one for another. Does that kind of address what you were going for, Asfia?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you, Professor Goyal. Professor Saran.
You see, Asfia, if you want to make research more researchable, you have to make it valuable to the user. And what it needs is very high degree of creativity on the part of the researcher. Today is the age of computerization, what we call digital era. And therefore, suppose somebody came buying a dress to your retail outlet. Now you want to know what other things can I sell to that person? Can I sell accessories? Can I sell footwear? And this is where the digital era gives you all the digital tools. You can have machine learning, artificial intelligence, and this will prompt to you, hey, this customer with these attributes, this behavior is more likely to do these ones. So this is where, if you use this creativity, your research will become more researchable. Rest of it, Dr. Lakshmi has equipped you in her answer.
Thank you, Professor Saran, and thank you, Ms. Asfia. Now, my next youth guest is Group Captain Atul Nandekar.
I'm Group Captain Atul Nandekar. I am from Nasik. I am pursuing my second year MBA in Marketing Management. I am situated, Nasik is in Maharashtra, as everyone knows. Now, I have heard all the speeches very carefully, sir, and I have only one question, that every time somebody referred it is like a nail and hammer case for the research and data collection. My question is that every time we start from the scratches. Why till now we have not made a platform where all the sets are available, and depending on your research methodology, you get a start at a different stage from where you are actually want to get the results. My question is very basic, that every time you have to start from the scratch. Is there any scope for this, sir?
Okay, Professor Saran.
Mr. Atul, you see, like the COVID keeps on reinventing itself into a new variant, business problems keep reinventing themselves, afresh. This is the basic answer for you. If I make a standard platform methodology algorithm, by the time I finish making it, the variant had moved on. I have to restart and redo it. So this is the main reason. Today, the businesses have become very dynamic. It has become global village. Competitions has gone up. The opportunities have gone up. Super niche are there. Overnight, in less than 2 to 3 years, startups are becoming unicorns. So this is why it is not possible today, if ever in the history of business, to have a standardized algorithm so that I can find the hammer for a given nail. Thank you very much for a beautiful question, Mr. Atul.
Thank you, Professor Saran. Professor Goel.
Yeah, that is an interesting question. So the research question keeps changing. That's why you have to keep changing your nails and hammer. So it's not that, we don't have a tool set already. The research question keeps changing. Having said that, there are a lot of data sets available if you look for them, right? So in the healthcare space, there's a lot of public health data sets available that you can access for free. In the financial place, there are some databases that have stock market data going back for decades, right? That's not cheap data, however. You do have to pay for it, but it's available. Companies like Facebook, Twitter, they sell aggregate data. They make a lot of money selling data. Even the credit card companies sell de-identified data. So there is a lot of public data available if that meets your research question, right? So if your research question is how have consumer spending habits changed in the last 10 years, you can pay to get data from credit card companies, and you're not starting from scratch. You don't have to go and ask people to get that. Same thing with methodology, same thing with your hammers, right? So we do have a lot of, so if you use a statistical package like SPSS or R or SAS or whatever, there's a lot of inbuilt techniques that you can already use, plug and play, point and click. So you're not starting from scratch from these things. But, like Dr. Saran said, if your research question is unique, if the data hasn't been gathered by somebody else before, and that's, we have not had the ability to analyze big data with personal computers until now. You needed a supercomputer, you needed, heavy processing power. But now with distributed computing, it's really easy to do big data problems, right? If you have an Amazon Web Service account, it's so easy to analyze big data. So our research questions have changed, our abilities have changed. So yeah.
Okay, thank you, Professor Goel, and thank you, Group Captain Atul Nandedkar. Now, my next youth guest is Chayan Bhattacharya.
Thank you, sir. My name is Chayan Bhattacharya, and I am a student of MBA, currently pursuing it from Accurate Institute of Management and Technology, Greater Noida, Gautam Budh Nagar, Uttar Pradesh. So my question is that what are the main issues that a researcher should concern about before collecting the research work, before doing the research work?
Okay, Professor Goel.
I love this question because when I teach PhD classes, PhD students are very eager to jump into the data collection phase, right? Because that's fun, right? You're collecting data. And this is exactly what I tell them. Don't, because you only have one shot at collecting data. It's expensive to collect data. So make sure you know what to collect, how much to collect, what your variables are, and all of that starts with, first, what is your research philosophy? What is your research question, right? What kind of method are you planning to use? Are you going to use experiments or surveys or a focus group? What should your effect size be, right? Are you aiming for a certain level of effect size, right? So have all of those things in place before you jump into data collection to maximize the chances that you will get significant results. Because if you just start collecting data, not knowing why you're collecting it or what you're collecting, you're going to get a bunch of random stuff. In computers, we have a saying, garbage in, garbage out, DIGO. It's the same with research. You can collect data, but if it's just garbage data, your results are going to be garbage. And you might see some correlations, but you don't know why those correlations exist, right? And then it's pointless. So that's a very, very good question. You have to have those things in place before you start your data collection phase.
Thank you, Professor Goel. Professor Saran.
Chayan, you need to remember two terms. One is called research design. The other is called research methodology. To a less educated person, less rigorous person, the two will almost sound synonyms. Most business schools won't equip you for the distinction. Remember what Dr. Lakshmi said just now. PhD students are very eager to jump into the research work. Remember what I said as the decision problem and the translation into research problem. This work is exactly what research design requires you to do. If you don't do it and jump into research methodology or research work implementation methodology, you are heading for disaster. Lakshmi has quite well explained it to you. Please don't do that. As a manager, you must insist research design is completed before research methodology and research work starts. That's only when you get value for your money. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Saran, and thank you, Mr. Chen. Now, my next youth guest is Miss Delcy Paul.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Delcy Paul. I'm pursuing my MBA first year from St. Joseph's Degree and PG College, which is located in Hyderabad. My question is how to make research language simple yet accurate enough, and what is the most appropriate way to present research?
Professor Saran.
The only way to make it accurate is please define the terms carefully. Research question, carefully defined. Research objectives, carefully defined. Variables identified carefully. Information required, operationalized carefully. And population defined very carefully. Unit of research very carefully. Causal variables, independent variable, dependent variable, moderating variable, intermingling. These are the terms. And if you exactly define them, then you are successful. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Saran. Professor Goel.
Yeah, 100% agree. So accuracy is really important, and defining what you mean. So things like satisfaction, for example. Satisfaction is a very common variable in consumer behavior. How satisfied is your customer? What do you mean by satisfaction is extremely important, having those definitions in place. But I also want to address your first question, is how do you simplify, right? And I think that there's a danger in oversimplifying research, right? You see a lot of news headlines now, those sensational news, right? And they quote some fancy statistic like, I don't know, 9 out of 10 dentists recommend Pepsodent and 8 out of 10 dentists recommend Colgate. How is it possible that you have 9 out of 10 recommending one and 8 out of 10 recommend, so that statistics don't add up. Right. And as somebody who's trained in research, you have to have that critical mind to be able to question the simplified presentation of statistics. You have to be able to question it, right? When you hear statistics about election polls, for example, right? Don't buy that oversimplified headline. Question it. What was the sample, right? What is the reliability? What is the confidence interval of these statistics? So oversimplifying, I think, is dangerous. And somebody who's trained in research should be able to look through those oversimplifications. And that goes to the presentation as well. So when you put up a chart, right, when you have a bar chart or whatever, it's the height of the bar, that's the first thing that somebody sees. And data visualization is a whole field by itself, right? But you have to be careful to make sure that the scale is correct, that you are, properly qualifying what that representation means. It's very easy to misrepresent data. There's another saying in statistics: you can torture the data to say anything, right? So you can massage the data in any way you want. But as a true researcher, you have to be true to the data. You have to present it in its entire complexity in a way that you are making accurate or at least valid suggestions, right? So don't fall into the trap of oversimplifying just to get a sensational headline for something, even if it's for a company meeting. Our sales have gone up by 50%. 50% of what? 50% of last quarter, 50% of last decade, 50% in which product line? Make sure that you are bringing in that context when you present results.
Thank you, Professor Goel, and thank you, Ms. Paul. Now, my next youth guest is Mr. Devansh Gautam.
Good morning, everyone. I am Devansh Gautam. I am pursuing BBA from IMS UC Campus Courses, Ghaziabad, Uttar Pradesh. So my question is, like, there are, while doing research, there are many descriptive research design which are usually followed. Like a cross-sectional design, longitudinal design. So how these designs are used and applied during the research?
Professor Goel.
So this goes back to what Dr. Saran was saying, right? So you have to think about what research design makes sense for you. And your research question will drive your research design, right? So if for example, if one of the things you want to see is how do attitudes of people change as they grow older, right? Obviously, that's going to be a longitudinal design, right? Obviously, right? So a lot of it is determined upfront. If you do cross-sectional research, you have to make sure that your statistics are sound enough so you are not overstating causality, because that's the biggest pitfall with cross-sectional research. You're correlating two variables and you're saying this leads to this. Right? A leads to B. But since you're measuring them at the same time, it's cross-sectional, that causality is something that you have attributed to the data. So you have to make sure that you're doing things to inform that. And theory is part of it, right? So theory will help you form that hypothesis, which helps you to justify why A leads to B, right? That causality is much easier to establish in longitudinal design. But sometimes a cross-sectional design is what the research question needs, right? So a lot of it just depends on the research question and then really thinking about what research design makes sense.
Thank you, Professor Goel. Professor Saran.
See, Professor Lakshmi has given you a very sophisticated, beautiful answer. There is very difficult to add to this one. Let me just add one more thing, even though difficult. I have a 7-month-old granddaughter. She cries at times. My daughter-in-law listens to the cry and reads whether she needs a change of diaper or she needs to be fed. You have to be a researcher like that to listen to the business problem. And as a researcher, you will see, as Professor Lakshmi beautifully elaborated in her answer, whether it is descriptive, longitudinal, cross-sectional kind of thing, or causal kind of a situation. It talks. You must have the ear of the mother to understand what it is saying. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Saran, and thank you, Mr. Devarsh Gautam. Now, my next youth guest is Mr. Deekshant Nagpal.
Good morning, sir. I'm Deekshant Nagpal, pursuing MBA from 𝐂𝐀𝐑𝐔 Institute of Management, Greater Noida. My question is, as an entrepreneur or a new business thinking of launching a new product in India, India is a big market. So what are some tips to avoid overflow of information while researching? Answer will be very fruitful for me because I'm working on a project and doing research.
Okay, thank you. Professor Saran.
For you, the life is very simple. You don't have very many problems. You have just one, how to make your business successful. And here the answer is, use a very tight filter to allow things in. You must remember your filter is, Deekshant, people don't buy what you sell. People buy what they want. If you remember this one, and through this, you decide your business problems, I think researchers will give you more than value for money. But this part you have to do. You can't expect a researcher to do it for you. This is business man's responsibility, particularly for a startup founder's responsibility. Thank you for a beautiful question.
Thank you, Professor Saran. Professor Lal Goel.
Deekshant, congratulations on being an entrepreneur. It's not an easy path to take. I mean, entrepreneurship is interesting because it is that you don't have past data to rely on, right? And research thrives on having data, right? So in collecting data for what you need, you do have to be very mindful about what you want to answer, right? Are you looking for feedback on specific features of your product or service? Are you looking at feedback on how it might be received in the marketplace? So having a very tight, like Dr. Sharan said, very tight research question and doing some kind of market research to find what your MVP might be to meet that, before you can start scaling up is going to be important, right? So you do have to do a little bit of validation of your idea in the market before you start putting money towards, production and scaling up. But that market research needs to be very specific on what it is you're trying to get feedback on. Are you trying to get feedback on, if it's a product, is it specific features of a product? Is it the usability of the product? Is it how the product will integrate with other products, right? So what exactly about the product you want to know? If it is a service, then again, is the service something that's missing? Why would somebody come to you versus somebody else, right? So having a very specific research question and then getting some validation from the market based on that research question before you can scale up will be very important.
Thank you, Professor Goel, and thank you, Mr. Deekshant. Now, my next youth guest is Miss Mansi Soni.
Good morning. My name is Mansi Soni. I am pursuing MBA from HIMCS from Mathura. And my question is, what is the observational method of research?
Professor Goel.
So I'm not sure I fully understand the question, but I'll take a shot at answering it. All research comes from observation, right? We call that empiricism. Empiricism means if we notice something, then that's a data point, right? Whether it's through our senses or whether it's through measurement, so empiricism is a way of collecting data. There are other schools of thought. So the Greek philosophers did research just based on thinking. It was armchair research. So they would sit and think about, I think this is how the solar system is situated, right? But now we rely on empiricism. So we use telescopes to actually observe what's happening in the galaxies to inform us what the solar system looks like. So observations are extremely important. How do you collect those observations? Now that's where you get into those research design, right? Are you doing it through experiments? Are you doing it through surveys, focus groups? Are you doing it through sensors, IoT devices, big data, whatever, right? But observation is the starting point for all empirical research. Does that answer what you were trying to ask, Mansi?
No, ma'am.
It does not.
So.
Okay. So, what's your question, Mansi?
What is the observational method of research?
You see, Mansi, there is nothing called observational method of research. It is loose use of words. Some business professors use, but they should not. It is actually observation method of data collection. To give you a context, you see, some people say primary research and secondary research. There is nothing like primary or secondary research. It is only the type of data that the research is digging. Existing one, secondary, new one, fresh for the purpose of answering the specific research question is primary. So the root cause is loose use of terms in research by professors, by textbooks, and everybody in between. That's why Professor Lakshmi could not get it. In the ecosystem she exists, these things are filtered out of the system. But some places these escape the filters and reach the students' minds. Don't mind it. I'm not, underrating anything or anything. I'm just cautioning you to the value of correct definitions and correct uses of terms. And if you find some loose ones, chuck them out. Don't keep them and let them become your vocabulary. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Saran, and thank you, Ms. Mansi Soni. Now, my next youth guest is Mr. Mohammad Johar.
I'm Mohammad Johar, pursuing my MBA second year from St. Joseph Degree and PG College, Hyderabad. So my question is, what are the majorly seen misconceptions which newly researchers go on with their initial stages?
Professor Saran.
See, the most common misconception is research has to be very academic or very rigorous, and it has a very, very sophisticated way. People stay committed to the hammer, not realizing there is the nail which gives it the value. So discounting the business side of the application is the one, and this is the mother misconception. We have time pressures. I won't go into other ones. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Saran. Professor Goyal.
Yeah, I agree with that. Being too wedded to a particular methodology, if you only know surveys and you try to apply surveys to everything, that might not be the best fit for your research question. And the other way around as well, right? So if you go into research from a very applied perspective and you're looking at what a company wants answered, but you're not using the right methodology to approach that question, and that happens a lot in companies, right, that don't have that training, right? So the academic mindset brings in the rigor, but you also need the relevance. So it's balancing that rigor as well as the relevance is important. So the misconception is that I have to be extremely rigorous or I have to be extremely relevant. You have to be able to balance both of these things.
Very well said. Beautiful.
Thank you, Professor Goel. Thank you, Professor Saran. And thank you, Mr. Mohammad Johar. Now, my next youth guest is Miss Sakshi Datta.
Yes, so my name is Sakshi Datta. I'm pursuing my MBA first year from Sri Sharda Institute of Professional Studies from Lucknow, UP. So my question is this, that as I want to establish my own business, so how can we incorporate analytical hierarchy process and the ground theory in the same frame, as there is a continuous change in the situations nowadays, as there is a pandemic, and in future there are more new, as we can say, that new mutants. So how we will deal with this to establish our own dreams in a how we can use these two researches in a one frame.
Okay, thank you, Professor Goel.
Great to see so many budding entrepreneurs. Congratulations, Sakshi, on having big dreams. Don't overcomplicate it, right? So you don't have to go in with a framework in mind, right? And that's what Dr. Saran was saying, was having too much of that rigor in mind. So you don't need to have a hierarchical, analytical framework as well as a grounded theory approach, right? So think about what is your immediate problem at hand. What is it that you're trying to do with your company right now, right? What do you need an answer for right now? And what is the research question there? What you can apply? You can absolutely use multiple methods, multiple approaches, multiple philosophies based on what your research questions are. You don't have to be wedded to one big framework of looking at things at all, right? So approach it question by question. Right now, this is what I need to know. This is how I'm going to answer this question. Move on to the next one. That would be my suggestion.
Thank you, Professor Goel. Professor Saran.
You see, entrepreneur has to be very careful about efficiency of resource use. What are you getting per minute of time investment? What are you getting per rupee of time invested? And what are you getting per employee brought in the founder team? Once you are careful of these ones, the changes which are going to happen will speak to you like that mother listening to the baby. What does it need? Does it need a very rigorous research because a lot of things are riding on it? Or is it an operating decision with a limited impact? In your language, is it a strategic decision and issue that you're dealing with? Or is it a operating day-to-day thing dealing with? According to this one, Professor Goel has already told you, do those things. You'll be a very successful entrepreneur. Your competition will be afraid of the way you are approaching your decision-making based on quality information. Nobody can touch you. You will have a blue ocean existence. You will be free from red ocean, blood-letting competition. Remember what Dr. Lakshmi said, and then use it.
Thank you, Professor Saran, and thank you, Ms. Sakshi Datta. Now, my next youth guest is Ms. Saloni Jain.
Good morning, sir. I am Saloni Jain, and I am pursuing MBA from Hindustan Institute of Management and Computer Science, Parimatra. My question is, what is the most important process of business research?
Professor Saran?
Please say it again.
Repeat your question.
Sure, sir. What is the most important process of business research?
Please repeat it once more, Mr. Saloni.
Okay. Please repeat.
What is the most important process of business research?
3 times I made you repeat it. This is the most important thing, research, knowing what is most important. Your question has the answer in it.
Thank you, Professor Saran. Professor Goel.
So this is an important question, but this is also something that has come up in different ways in the previous questions, right? And Dr. Saran has talked about it. It's thinking about what you need to do before doing it. Before you jump into the process, before you actually start doing research, think about what is it that you need to do and what's the best way to do it. That's the most important thing. Once your philosophy, once your research design, once your decisions about the methodology are clear, the actual research process will be smooth, So the most important part happens before.
Thank you, Professor Goel. Thank you, Ms. Saloni. Next youth guest is Ms. Sapna Ram Buddha.
My name is Sapna, and I'm pursuing my BBA second year in finance from Sandeep University, Nasik. And my question is, there are a lot of startup business in India want to come up in the market in a perfect competition, but still they haven't got their place, and they still failed after after analyzing the market and the market situation, but they still failed. What was the reason they failed? Because there are a lot of startup companies.
Professor Goel.
If I had the answer to that, I'd be a multi-millionaire. I'd invest in the right companies only, right? Not the failures. But so this is where, our applied sciences are different from the natural sciences. In natural sciences, your predictions are almost always accurate, right? Because nature follows very strict laws and theories. Our science, management science, and the business sciences have to take into account human factors, and humans are not always predictable, right? Organizations are not always predictable. Processes might be predictable, right? So even like the stock market, the reason why valuations of companies, established companies, big companies like Facebook and Tesla, they rise and fall not because of what the company is doing, but because of what we think the company might or might not do. Right? Facebook lost so much value as Meta, even though Meta is supposed to be the next big thing in the digital world, right? The whole movement towards a metaverse. So why is the stock market not liking that? We don't know, right? So it's an inaccurate science because we have human factors involved in it. There's also luck. There's also, pandemic, unforeseen events. So there's a lot that goes into the discipline of business sciences, but that's what makes it fun.
Okay, thank you, Professor Goel. Professor Saran.
There are two things which you must remember here. Dr. Goel says it is human more important than process. C, a business failed is a very vague statement. I wanted to make a team of 12 people. There are only 9 people on my team. I have failed. No, thank you. I haven't. It is a setback, and it's temporary setback. I did not meet my goals in the estimated time. It may take me a few more months to get those 3 other people, and then I'm not failed. So failure is not permanent. It is human aspect, as Dr. Lakshmi emphasized very well. The second thing that you must remember, one man's food is another man's poison. What your competitor thinks is your strength, maybe your weakness. And therefore, if you keep these two things, add what Professor Lakshmi has said, you get the complete package of the answer.
Thank you, Professor Saran, and thank you, Ms. Sapna. Now, my next youth guest is Mr. Shah S. Dhawal.
Hello, my name is Shah Dhawal. Currently, I'm pursuing MBA from St. Joseph Degree and PG College, Hyderabad. And my question is, what is the impact of COVID-19 on researchers and how it is different to do a research before COVID-19 and after COVID-19?
Professor Saran.
You see, everything moved online. COVID protocol was there. As we said, COVID appropriate behavior, CAB. Researchers were not exempt from that. So those aspects which were connected with implementing the research methodology, those only got affected. Rest, everything remained unaffected. This is my concise and precise answer to your question, Dhawal.
Thank you, Professor Saran. Professor Goyal.
So, given that we are behavioral scientists, right, we look at behavior, I think this is a fascinating time for researchers in business because we have new business models, right, work from home, hybrid work. We have new technologies, right, so new digital platforms. We have moved towards cloud. We have new issues, right, so how are employees dealing with remote work, right, how are new teams being formed? How do you create trust between dispersed teams? So there's new research questions, new methods, new issues. So I think it's a fascinating time. It's given us more stuff to do as business researchers. Companies are struggling to find answers because this has never happened before. So they're still trying to figure out, ways to move forward to whatever the new normal is and new kind of business practices. So I think this is a great time for business research.
Thank you, Professor Goel. Thank you, Mr. Shah. Now, my next youth guest is Mr. Siddesh Thapa. Are you there? You have closed your video. Mr. Siddesh Thapa? No, he is not there. Now, I'm moving to the next youth guest is Miss Sonia Singh.
Thank you, sir. Besides Sonia Singh, I'm currently pursuing BBA from IMS Ghaziabad University Courses Campus and also Bachelor's in English Honours from IGNOU. So my question is that if we see that there are two terms, manager and researcher, they both are different yet together. So I just want to know what's the relationship between them and why it is very necessary nowadays.
Professor Goel.
So I don't necessarily see them as different, right? Manager and researcher. A manager has to do some kind of research to make decisions. He may not consider himself a researcher. He might not know the language of research, but he's still using some sort of basis to make decisions, which is what research is, right? And a researcher, unless you're doing absolute basic research, right, which does not have any practical implications, you are doing some kind of decision making with that. You're informing companies or you're, making predictions that will help decision making. So I don't necessarily see these as two different things. Right. Even in the entrepreneurial space, if you go in and you're presenting your business idea to a group of venture capitalists or angel investors, coming in with some kind of statistics will significantly increase your chances of getting funding. Right. So it's not that you wear two different hats. It's just about having that mindset of being able to use data to inform your decision making. And if that's what you call a researcher, that's a researcher, but you can do that in multiple roles. It doesn't have to be either or.
Thank you, Professor Goel. Professor Saran.
You see, Sonia, what you want as a business is profits. What do profits come from? Come from quality decisions. What do quality decisions come from? Dependable information. And who gives you the dependable information? It is the research expert on your team. And therefore, if you do not speak very clearly, if the baby is not crying per nature's code, mother will misread it. And this is where your answer lies. This is what Dr. Lakshmi is saying. She doesn't see them different. I don't see them different because they are part of the same essential links of the chain. It's only one chain. Links are different, but they are links of the same chain. If you realize this one, then your question will be solved.
Thank you, Professor Saran, and thank you, Ms. Sonia Singh. Now, my next youth guest is Mr. Tejinder Pratap Singh.
Yes, sir. My name is Tejinder Pratap Singh. I'm pursuing my MBA from Sri Shraddha Group of Institution, Gosain, situated in Lucknow. So my question is that what are the methods and tools for effective and accurate business research? And also that we all know that we just had overcome from a pandemic situation. So what is the impact of pandemic on researchers designed before the pandemic and conducted during the pandemic?
Professor Saran.
I already answered the second part of your question. If things have moved as per the requirements of COVID appropriate behavior, nothing is above human health and life, not business, not research. Second part is, you see the productivity of research has become much more vital in the post-pandemic era. Great resignation has happened. Employees are opportunities and liabilities. People are most important part, be it research or be it anything else in business. And this is, if you understand, your whole answer comes from these two parts and tenets.
Thank you, Professor Saran. Professor Goyal.
I don't think I have much to add to that. But in terms of what are the research methods, if you take any basic course in qualitative and quantitative methods, you'll get an exposure to different kind of methods. We have everything ranging from experiments to surveys to interviews, etc., etc. And you have to pick one, like we've talked about before, that fits your research question.
Thank you, Professor Goyal. Thank you, Mr. Tejendra Pratap Singh. My last youth guest is Miss Vanishka Gupta.
Thank you, sir. I'm Vanishka Gupta, pursuing BBA from IMS Ghaziabad. My question is about COVID situation. I know death is fact. That death is fact for everybody, right? Then why people work beyond the limit and stress their life? There is a lot of difference between taking stress or enjoying the work. So what do you think about this fact?
Professor Goyal.
I completely agree with you, Vanshika. I don't think that stress is healthy, and I think COVID has been an eye-opener for a lot of people that ignored the work-life balance, right? We don't live to work, we work to live, and we have to be mindful of that. And personally, I say I am really thankful for what I do, the job I have, because it allows me to think about things. I'm not just, in the moment reacting to stuff, and I'm not caught up in that corporate wheel of a 9-to-5 job. Being a researcher allows you to reflect, allows you to think about things, gives you the space to formulate questions and the ability to research the things that are meaningful, things like that, right? Things like, why is the Great Resignation happening, like Dr. Saran mentioned, or what is the new work-life balance, right? So I completely agree with you. And I think a lot of people are now rethinking what is the value of work to them. And, that opens up different avenues of behavioral research as well.
Thank you, Professor Goyal. Professor Saran.
See, Vanshika, I'll answer the question at a personal level. Before COVID, I wanted everything as structured in my life with respect to work. And I always put work before my own preferences. If I had a friend to visit, I may, not give it due importance. If I have a student needing counseling, that was my life before the pandemic. Today, I know that was wrong and I want to change it. So I gave up a regular, structured Indian academic life. I have decided and actually moved to launch my own consulting, building it, which I have been postponing for more than 18 years. So this much of impact it has had, but the basics are the same. I wanted to have a life fulfilled, and the pandemic has made sure that I recognize it explicitly, not implicitly, and not postpone it for tomorrow. Beautiful question, Vanshika. Nice way to put it.
Thank you very much, Professor Saran, and thank you, Ms. Vanshika. Now, because the time is not there, I am getting the message from the studio. And I think all the questions which you have asked today, our youth have taken all the care and replied by both the chief guests. But still, if you have any questions which you feel that it is not answered and you want to more clarification, you already have my number. You can WhatsApp me those questions. I will get the answers from these two experts. But because of the time constraint, and today, to be very frank, we have done lots of sessions like this. And even in one session, 78 answers were given. But today, two experts, and they are giving detailed answers. I think this is the reason of the research, that they are doing so much research and they want to do the research, how the answers to be given in details. So that is why today we have to say sorry for no further questions, but still you can ask any question, you can send me, or you can put in any of the channels who are showing it. And now I would like to go to both the chief guests, one minute each. Professor Saran, what would you like to say for today's conference?
First and foremost, I want to recognize the talent, the range, the width which the youth participants have put to us. It was very stimulating to me. and in limited time, I grew up a lot in research applications and research sophistication. More than that, Professor Lakshmi was a perfect complement. I think we did a good jugalbandi to satisfaction of you, Mr. Goel. Thank you very much for your stewardship and making the experience so pleasant. Thank you very much, Professor Lakshmi. Thank you, Mr. Goel.
Thank you very much, Professor Saran. And now, Professor Dr. Lakshmi Goyal, your comment. 1 minute, please.
Dr. Saran started the call by talking about quality, right? Quality of information. And I think quality always is superior to quantity. So even though we did not have 78 questions or answers, the quality of our answers, I think was great. And that was because of the quality of the question. So thank you very much for having us here. And I really enjoyed this as well.
Okay, thank you very much. And so viewers, you have seen today how the youth from different parts of India ask the questions. And these are very, very valid questions. After all, they are the future of the country. They are the entrepreneurs. They are the going to start up, be the promoter of the startups. And if they have these types of queries today, which you already have seen, it shows the potential of our country, that the time is not far. Then country can also become a wish guru in this field also. So thank you very much. And today's program has been live telecasted by V4 News, Caru News, V4 Stream, Malnadu TV India, News Gaon se, Samvad Sarokar News, Bharat Post News, Gyan, as well as it was shown live on Facebook and YouTube. And our endeavor to bring to you every day new topic in media conference with Lal Goel at 10:30 a.m. And tomorrow our topic is digital rupee. Yes, you might have heard in this budget, this time our finance minister declared that India is going to have a digital rupee very soon. So, and our panelists are Professor Mohanlal Agarwal, President Indo-Gulf Management Association, Dubai, Dr. Nilesh Borde, Professor Finance and Strategy, Goa Business School, Goa University, Goa, Ms. Shalini S. Manages, Founder Director, SimSim Advisory Limited, Goa, and Dr. N. Sivasankaran, Associate Professor, Finance, XLRI, Jamshedpur. So please tune in tomorrow for media conference with Lal Goel at 10:30 a.m. Thank you all the youth guests for joining us. Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Sudhi Saran, and thank you very much, Professor Dr. Lakshmi Goyal, for giving the replies to all the queries raised by our so intelligent youth, which they have raised. And thank you all the viewers, and I'm sure that today's program is very much enlightening, educative, and in case if you have any suggestions, please mention this in any of the channels inbox.